You're listening to Rot-Weiss-Rot Report, a podcast for those who live and work in Austria. Every week, we cover the main events and news, brief and clear, so you stay informed about important changes affecting your work, documents, and daily life. Today we'll discuss: politicians are once again debating whether to bring back inheritance tax, while the Ministry of Finance has decided not to index child benefits to save the budget. Don't expect a sharp drop in supermarket prices either. The government still hasn't decided whether to reduce VAT. Meanwhile, there's good news for those looking for work or thinking about changing their professional direction. Also in our review, new opportunities for parents of school children and one of the most high-profile court cases of the year. And of course, we'll talk about Eurovision, because Vienna right now is literally the musical capital of Europe. All this in just a moment, starting with the week's main events.
The main political event of last week was undoubtedly the controversy surrounding Erbschaftssteuer, inheritance tax. Austria abolished it in 2008, and since then, if you inherit an apartment or money, you don't pay the state a single euro. Austria is an exception here, as such a tax exists in most European Union countries. This week, the Green Party, Die Grünen, led by Leonore Gewessler, began demanding the tax's return for inheritances exceeding 1 million euros. The initiative was backed by the Chamber of Labor, Arbeiterkammer, and trade unions. They argue that wealthy Austrians should contribute to the state coffers, with funds going towards social needs. As for Austrian residents themselves, polling showed that nearly every second person also supports reinstating the tax. If you're planning to receive an inheritance in Austria in the near future, nothing changes for you yet, as the discussion ended with the ÖVP and NEOS parties blocking the Greens' initiative. So to be clear, there will be no new inheritance taxes in the immediate future. The question then is, why are all local media writing about this? The answer is that politicians are already laying the groundwork for the next major parliamentary elections, Nationalratswahl, scheduled for 2029. The question of, should the wealthy pay more or not, will likely become one of the central issues in election platforms. So if the government changes in a few years, this tax could realistically return, and inheritance rules could become as strict as in neighboring Germany or France. For now, everything remains as it is, but the debate is intensifying. Changes to social benefits, however, are not merely discussion, they're already reality. Austria's Ministry of Finance, Bundesministerium für Finanzen, has decided to stop automatically raising child benefits. Previously, there was a straightforward system of benefit indexation. Payments increased when shop prices rose. Now the amounts of benefits such as Familienbeihilfe, family allowance, Kinderabsatzbetrag, child tax credit, and Schulstartgeld, school preparation grant, have been effectively frozen. This doesn't mean they've been cancelled, but payment amounts will stop growing in line with prices. Experts from Momentum Institute, an organization that calculates people's real incomes, explained how this will impact family budgets next year. For instance, a family with 2 children will receive 302 euros less in 2027 than they would have, and this figure will grow to 425 euros the following year. If you have 3 children, you'll lose out on up to 668 euros. According to economists, this will disproportionately affect women receiving Kinderbetreuungsgeld, childcare allowance, as the purchasing power of their personal incomes will decline monthly. The tax bonus, Familienbonus Plus, where the state returns part of your salary taxes for having a child, will now also be calculated differently. From now on, the full amount is only granted when both father and mother are officially employed. If one parent doesn't have a contract or simply stays at home, the family receives less money from the state. This means that official employment in Austria is becoming the primary condition for receiving benefits in full. The bottom line? If you're counting on these funds, understand that firstly, your real income will start falling from next year due to the cancellation of automatic benefit increases, and secondly, official employment of both parents is becoming critically important.
To conclude the topic of parental benefits, let's note that the government has finalized the transition to the digitale Eltern-Kind-Pass, a digital parent and child passport. It contains a schedule of mandatory medical examinations required from the start of pregnancy until the child turns 5. Previously, all information was recorded in traditional yellow paper booklets, but these will now gradually be replaced by electronic records. The new rules, according to the government, will take effect in October this year. You don't need to apply for this document separately. If your pregnancy is registered by a doctor after October, the electronic passport will appear in the system automatically. But be warned, if for any reason the doctor cannot enter visit data into the computer on time, or if you miss an examination deadline, your child care allowance, Kinderbetreuungsgeld, can be automatically reduced by 1,300 euros. To repeat, the changes take effect from October 1st, but it's better to prepare in advance. If you already have a paper booklet, you can continue using it. It remains valid until the program ends. One practical piece of advice for the future: if you're planning a pregnancy, make sure now that you have ID Austria activated. This is your digital access to government services. Only with this can you log into the ELGA system, your electronic medical record, and verify whether the doctor has uploaded all results. Such digital changes are making life in Austria simpler, but caring for the future generation is only part of the broader European vision. This very topic was in focus last week as Austria celebrated Europatag, Europe Day. If you're interested in global politics, we recommend following such events because politicians often use them to articulate their vision of Austria's future. What's interesting is that there's currently a certain division within Austrian leadership. Some politicians see the country as open, others want to close borders. Chancellor Christian Stocker and his deputy Andreas Babler speak with one voice, saying Austria's prosperity rests on EU membership. European rules, they argue, guarantee that everyone's rights will be protected. But the opposition, namely Herbert Kickl, leader of the FPÖ party, sharply criticizes Brussels. He has repeatedly stated that European bureaucrats interfere too much in Austria's affairs and prevent it from maintaining its geopolitical neutrality. Kickl calls for Austria to regain full control over its borders and laws. Simply put, his position is strong borders and minimal migration. And this is worth remembering when looking at political forecasts. Interestingly, Austrians themselves are not unanimously supportive of EU membership. The Eurobarometer survey, the main thermometer of sentiment in Europe, showed that Austria ranks among the top 3 most skeptical countries regarding EU membership. Nearly 40% of citizens believe that EU membership does them more harm than good. Only Greece and Bulgaria have more negative attitudes. This is important to understand. You live in a country where every third person views the idea of a united Europe with caution, and this directly influences what migration policy the government will pursue in the next elections. And with that, we conclude our overview of the week's main news and move on to financial news, specifically why supermarket receipts remain high.
Debates have once again flared up in Austria around Mehrwertsteuer, value-added tax, which you pay every time you buy bread, milk, or any groceries. The opposition is now actively pressuring the government to reduce this tax on food products from 10% to 5%, or even to 0. The logic is simple. Lower taxes mean cheaper food. However, the Finansausschuss, Finance Committee of Parliament, still cannot reach agreement. The Ministry of Finance, Bundesministerium für Finanzen, is approaching this decision very cautiously. Officials worry that if the tax is reduced, supermarkets simply won't change the price tags on shelves and will pocket the difference as additional profit. For consumers, this means that while politicians argue, no official price reduction from July 1st, as some media outlets began reporting, has actually occurred. For now, these remain political promises, however appealing. Moreover, Austria's tax system is quite complex. Even if the law passes, it's unlikely to affect prepared food. You could end up with a situation where, for example, the price of a regular bread roll, Semmel, might drop, but the same roll with sausage, Wurstsemmel, won't, because it's classified as prepared food with a different tax rate. So for now, watch your receipts carefully, and don't trust sensational headlines about instant price reductions. Another hot topic last week related to finance was the labor market situation. AMS, the State Employment Service, is sounding the alarm. The number of people unable to find work for an extended period, more than a year, has sharply increased. As of late April, Austria has nearly 400,000 unemployed, and every fourth person is classified as Langzeitarbeitslose, long-term unemployed who cannot find work for more than 12 months. It's particularly difficult for those aged 50 and above, as businesses are reluctant to hire older workers. This is happening despite the country experiencing not only unemployment, but also a labor shortage. The Ministry of Labor and the Employment Service, Arbeitsmarktservice, are considering how to solve the employment problem for people in the 50-plus category. One initiative involves so-called social enterprises. Instead of increasing unemployment benefits, the government is helping to create new jobs for older people. The most striking example of such an enterprise can be found in Vienna. At Vienna's main train station, there is a bicycle workshop with an unconventional approach. They train people over 60 in a new profession. Seniors learn the bicycle mechanic trade from scratch, working alongside younger people. These aren't just hobby courses. Nearly half of the graduates, over 40%, immediately secure jobs in private workshops. For the Austrian market, this is a significant achievement, as employers get craftspeople with both life experience and a fresh Austrian qualification. What does this mean for you if you're also in this age category and struggling to find work? Austria currently has tremendous demand for technical specialists, those who can work with their hands. There's a shortage everywhere, from equipment repair to service industries. Austria offers over 150 programs where you can retrain if your former profession isn't in demand here. It's worth asking your AMS advisor about such projects called Gemeinnützige Beschäftigungsprojekte, non-profit employment projects. These aren't just courses, but actual work in social or public organizations. For you, this is an opportunity to earn an Austrian certificate and, importantly, gain the very experience that all firms require. While participating in such a project, you continue receiving unemployment benefits, and the state essentially pays for your retraining. In Austria, you can change careers even at 60 if you have the strength and desire to work.
But finding a job is only half the battle. What matters is how much you can actually buy with that money. In April, inflation in Austria jumped to 3.3%. This is noticeably higher than in Eurozone neighbors, where prices rose by an average of only 2.1%. The statistical service Statistik Austria explains, the main blow to household budgets came from rising housing rents. April also saw increases in mobile phone and internet tariffs, and due to the tense situation in the Middle East, fuel prices remain high. This automatically feeds into the cost of products on supermarket shelves. The WIFO Institute has already revised its forecasts. Instead of the previously expected 2% inflation, we'll see approximately 3% by year's end. In practical terms, this means food has become 15 to 20% more expensive over 2 years, and wages aren't keeping pace. The only positive note? The economy has stopped contracting. After 2 years of stagnation, GDP, gross domestic product, grew by 0.2%. Austria's chancellor believes the country will finish this year even slightly in the black. This signals that the labor market will remain stable. Companies will resume planning for growth, which means preserving existing jobs and creating new ones. We also have interesting financial news from Burgenland that reflects the situation across the country. Young people finishing school are finding it increasingly difficult to secure their first job or apprenticeship position, Lehrstelle. The number of available vacancies in the region fell by 7.1%, while the number of those seeking apprenticeships increased by 10.6%. It's particularly challenging for young women, with unemployment among them rising by 8.9%. The main advice for those in this situation? Don't limit yourself to one region and send applications to neighboring states like Tyrol or Vorarlberg. Also, definitely contact the employment service AMS. They'll not only help with your CV free of charge, but can also offer special retraining programs or überbetriebliche Lehre, state-funded training. All information is available on their official portal.
And to conclude the economic news, let's remind you of an important deadline for prospective homeowners. If you're planning to buy property in Austria, you have less than 2 months to take advantage of a government benefit and save a significant sum. We're talking about the waiver of registration fees in the land register, Grundbuch, and for mortgage registration. Normally, these fees amount to 2.3% of the property value, but currently, the state allows you to keep this money. How does this work in concrete terms? When buying an apartment for 400,000 euros, you would typically pay around 10,000 euros just for processing documents. Right now, this amount could be zero for you. The benefit fully covers the first 500,000 euros of value. If the property is more expensive, say 600,000, you don't pay fees on the first 500,000, and the standard rate only applies to the remaining amount. However, there are 3 key conditions you should know about. This must be your primary residence, Hauptwohnsitz. You cannot buy an apartment to rent out under this program. You're obligated to live in this residence for at least 5 years. If you sell it earlier or change your registration, the state will demand the return of all saved funds. You must also confirm that you're buying the property to live in, for example, by providing documentation of the termination of your previous rental agreement. Why should you hurry? What matters isn't the day you sign the contract at the notary's office, but the date your application reaches the court. The deadline is June 30th, 2026. Considering Austrian bureaucracy and the time needed for bank verifications, you need to act today. For detailed consultation, contact your notary or lawyer handling the transaction. They're responsible for timely document submission. You can also find detailed information on the official portal of Austria's Ministry of Finance under the section Wohnbau-Paket. Now, let's move from numbers and economic forecasts to news that directly impacts the lives of foreigners in Austria.
According to data from the Vienna Chamber of Labor, Arbeiterkammer Wien, men in Austria still barely use their right to reduced working hours for childcare, Eltern-Kind-Pass. Although the law allows both parents to work fewer hours until the child turns 7, the main burden of household duties and childcare still falls on women. The figures confirm this. Austria has the highest rate of part-time employment, Teilzeit, among mothers in the entire European Union, 69%. For comparison, the EU average is only 32%. This means women more often sacrifice full salaries and careers, while men continue working full-time. The Arbeiterkammer emphasizes that this situation is a direct path to low pensions for women in the future. If you or your partner still want to take advantage of the opportunity to spend more time with your child, remember that Eltern-Teilzeit is available to both parents. But you should also weigh the risks, because fewer working hours today means a smaller pension and slower career progression in the future. Another interesting study was conducted by Statistik Austria. According to its results, the number of single-person households in the country is rapidly growing. Nearly 40% of all households are now apartments where only one person lives. This particularly affects people over 65, and among them, more than 2/3 are single women. Responding to this trend, new forms of communal living for seniors are emerging in Austria. One of the best-known projects is WG Melange by Caritas Wien. This is a shared apartment format, something between private housing and a dormitory. Each resident has their own room, but the kitchen, terrace, and common areas are shared. Rent starts from €600 per month, and this amount already includes all utilities. Importantly, migrants can participate in such projects. The main requirement is legal resident status in Austria and registration. Also, since this is a social initiative, your income shouldn't exceed a certain limit, but it must be sufficient to pay the rent. Additionally, you'll need at least basic knowledge of German to communicate with neighbors in common areas. Demand for such places is enormous, so waiting lists are getting longer. Similar housing already operates in Vienna's 9th and 16th districts. If you or your parents are considering this option, it's worth contacting Caritas or Korping Österreich now to join the waiting list or learn about the conditions. Finally, we have useful information directly relevant to parents of children with special needs. Those who know about the Inklusion system in Austrian schools. Education Minister Christoph Wiederkehr has promised that in the 2027 and 2028 school years, children with special needs will have a legally guaranteed right to 11th and 12th years of education. Currently in Austria, more than a third of children with disabilities study in separate Sonderschulklassen, special classes, rather than alongside other children. If your child has special needs and you want them to study in a regular school, you have this right. And if difficulties arise, contact the Chamber of Labor, Arbeiterkammer, or the organization Lebenshilfe. They'll explain all your rights free of charge, help you choose a school or kindergarten, and advise how to obtain an assistant for your child. This is your legal way to resolve educational matters without unnecessary stress. And now, we move on to news from the capital. In a moment, we'll tell you what happened last week in Vienna.
The Eurovision Song Contest has kicked off in Vienna. From May 10th, the Eurovision Village opened on Rathausplatz, the square near the City Hall. Admission is free, and all shows are broadcast on large screens. Besides the official concerts, Vienna has two main locations for fans. The Prater-Dom Club is the official Euro Club for evening parties and is open until May 16th. And at the Vienna Museum, Wien Museum, they've opened the House of Fans, a quieter venue for meetings and themed exhibitions. To better navigate events, the city recommends installing the Ivy app, Vienna's official guide. It features a special Eurovision quest route and an up-to-date map of all parties and fan zones. Naturally, there are more tourists in the city, and traffic around Stadthalle, Rathausplatz, and Vienna's center will change throughout the competition week. So let's remind you that Wiener Linien publishes daily route updates. Also remember that you cannot enter Stadthalle with bags larger than A4 format, and all tickets are personalized and checked against passports. Several themed exhibitions dedicated to the contest's history and music have also opened in Vienna. At the House of Music, Haus der Musik, you can see an exhibition about past winners and Austrian participants. An exhibition has also opened at the Technical Museum, Technisches Museum. There you can see how sound recording and broadcast technologies have evolved. For those who love taking photos, the city has prepared several Instagram-worthy locations. For example, in the square in front of Karlskirche, there's a giant microphone, a replica of the Eurovision Crystal Trophy. Additionally, some metro stations have changed their design. Eurovision hits from various years play there, and portraits of the most famous artists are on the walls. If you're planning nighttime entertainment, besides Pratterdome, parties are happening in many clubs across the city. For example, the well-known U4 Club is preparing special playlists with Eurovision songs, and in the Naschmarkt district, many bars are hosting themed karaoke nights. There's also a nice bonus. At many venues, admission is free if you come with your country's symbols or in a festive costume. And of course, Eurovision isn't the only important news. Let's start with something unpleasant. On May 4th, a study appeared showing that street dust in Vienna contains dangerous concentrations of tire and brake pad particles. The highest pollution was recorded on Wagramerstrasse and in the Schwedenplatz area. The problem is that these particles don't just lie on the asphalt, but are constantly lifted into the air by vehicle movement and wind. Scientists emphasize that due to dense construction and the city's ventilation characteristics, this dust stays at pedestrian breathing level. Researchers say Vienna is cleaned less frequently than other major capitals, so this entire cocktail accumulates near curbs, and then we breathe it. So the advice is simple. On major streets, try not to walk right next to the road. And from early May, the city has allocated another 7 million euros for solar panels, and now the rules have become simpler. The main innovation: the city now provides funding not only for standard solar panels on roofs. You can get a subsidy for solar facades and integrated systems that simultaneously create shade on balconies or terraces and produce electricity. This is an attempt to involve residents of densely built-up districts where roofs are often inaccessible for equipment installation. Parallel to this, a wave of inspections has started in old buildings, Altbauten. Inspectors are paying attention to the condition of facades, balconies, and window energy efficiency. Vienna's authorities want to force landlords to invest in old buildings to reduce heat loss. If a building owner ignores technical defects or doesn't carry out mandatory modernization, they face heavy fines. These were all the main news from the Austrian capital, and in a moment, you'll learn what happened in different regions of the country.
Let's start with Salzburg. This is where a trial began that all of Austria is watching. In the dock is a 66-year-old man who shot a burglar in his own home. The tragedy itself occurred in summer 2025. The homeowner returned home, caught a thief there, and shot him in the back of the head from 9 meters away. The main dispute in court now centers on the term Notwehr, the right to self-defense. The prosecution claims this was murder, not defense. The investigation established that at the moment of the shot, the thief was already fleeing and had his back turned, meaning he posed no direct threat to the homeowner's life. However, the man himself says he acted in a state of panic. He assures that he saw something shiny in the burglar's hands and took it for a knife, so he pulled the trigger. This case has become high profile because it touches on a painful question. Where in Austria does the right to defend your property end and crime begin? Under local laws, you cannot shoot a person who is simply fleeing with your belongings because human life is valued more highly than property. A verdict in this case hasn't been delivered yet, but it will become an important precedent for all gun owners in the country. In Lower Austria, after the devastating floods of 2024, the situation has turned 180 degrees. The region is now suffering from severe drought. Groundwater levels have critically dropped. Half of the monitoring stations are recording abnormally low levels. The problem has already moved from theoretical to practical. In the Melk district, Bezirk Melk, people are experiencing a real shortage of drinking water. Local authorities are calling on residents to conserve resources and not waste water on lawn irrigation or filling pools without urgent need. Experts warn, if the situation doesn't change, water use restrictions could become mandatory for the entire region by early summer. This is especially important for those living in private houses and using their own wells, which could dry up first. Meanwhile, Lower Austria continues to move away from gas. In the Bucklige Weltwechselland region, 32 municipalities at once have agreed to completely switch to ecological heating. These aren't just plans. Over 80% of public buildings there are already heated without gas and heating oil. Overall, across all of Lower Austria, 172 municipalities have already joined this initiative. The state is now actively allocating funds for replacing old boilers. The most popular option is heat pumps, Wärmepumpen, which you can get a substantial subsidy for. If you live in a private house and want to update your heating system but don't know what exactly to choose, contact the EU agency, Energie- und Umweltagentur Nützör, for free advice. In Upper Austria, in Reichersberg, they've officially put a period on the story of building a new Amazon warehouse. Local authorities have definitively rejected this project. In previous episodes, we talked about how such a large center means hundreds of new jobs and serious tax revenue for the region's budget. Now these vacancies won't exist, but local residents and farmers are celebrating victory. For them, Amazon's rejection means trucks won't be rumbling under their windows around the clock, and the surrounding land won't be flooded with concrete for massive parking lots. The details of the decision are being kept secret, but it's clear that public protests proved stronger than promises of large investments. So the large-scale construction is cancelled, and the district will remain quiet and agricultural as before.
A historic event occurred in Tyrol. Innsbruck police conducted one of the most successful operations in recent years. At the end of April, law enforcement seized a record shipment of cocaine, a full 17 kilograms. 4 suspects have already been arrested. On the black market, this quantity of drugs is worth more than €1.5 million, so for local criminals, this is a colossal blow. Besides fighting crime, the city is now actively combating the threat of fires. Due to dry and sunny weather, Innsbruck has officially banned lighting bonfires and barbecuing at outdoor sites. Be careful. This applies even to designated recreational areas. Police promise to strictly monitor compliance with the rules, and fines for violating this ban are quite high. Meanwhile, in Styria, a massive forest fire in the Eisbach-Rhine area has finally been brought under control, but it hasn't been completely extinguished yet. Dozens of fire brigades are still working on site, watering the ground so the fire doesn't flare up again due to dry weather. The damage is enormous. Flames destroyed significant forest areas, and firefighting was complicated by steep terrain, requiring aviation to be called in. Rescuers say they'll be on duty there for several more days until they're convinced the last smoldering root has gone out. And in Graz, passions are running high around the stadium reconstruction. The city has reviewed the old plan and approved a new project for €60 million. This is exactly half of what they wanted to spend last year. However, even this amount isn't in the city budget. The mayor's office says directly, without financial help from the Styrian government, construction won't begin. And residents of Vorarlberg, specifically the city of Bregenz, can be envied. It's officially been recognized as Austria's greenest city. According to a new Greenpeace report based on satellite data, Bregenz's center has over 38% green coverage, trees, parks, and lawns. This is the best indicator among all federal state capitals. For comparison, cities like Vienna, Innsbruck, or St. Pölten have significantly less greenery in the center. Experts explain. A large number of trees isn't just beauty, but salvation from summer heat, as they work like natural air conditioners and clean the air of dust. These were the main news from the federal states, and next we'll tell you about cultural news and events worth visiting this week in Vienna.
Gustav Klimt's masterpieces have returned to the Upper Belvedere after major restoration, so now they can be seen in their original splendor. The museum has displayed the updated paintings from the Golden Period alongside the legendary The Kiss. But due to the influx of Eurovision tourists, entry rules have become stricter. Getting inside from the street is now almost impossible, as strict time slots are in effect. You must book tickets online for a specific hour, otherwise you risk spending all day in line under the palace walls. Meanwhile, on the roof of the Leopold Museum in the Museum Quarter, they've opened the Libelle Terrace, which has become the main spot for evening relaxation. Now electronic musicians play there every evening for free, and literary readings take place under the open sky. This is the perfect spot to catch the sunset with a drink and a panoramic view of Vienna's center from above. Since entry is free and the terrace isn't made of rubber, it's better to arrive early. The elevator to the roof fills up quickly, and a line often forms downstairs. Also on May 15th, the most important event of the year after Eurovision begins, the Vienna Festwochen Festival. It will run until June. This is a huge mix of theater, performance, and music. The opening usually takes place for free on the Rathausplatz with a grand concert. If you want to see contemporary art, you should definitely visit the festival. And let's remind you that in Vienna's 15th district, in Funfhaus, the Grätzel Art Open is taking place, a unique art event. Over 120 artists have opened their studios and workshops to visitors. Admission is free. If you're interested in art, this is exactly what you should see.
This concludes today's episode. Thank you for being with us. We'll continue to keep you informed about the most important events. Subscribe to the Rot-Weiss-Rot Report, your weekly guide to living and working in Austria. Find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.